The Empirical Energy podcast blows open the silent revolution, rewriting the rules of global energy markets. Measured, verified energy is no longer an alternative. It's becoming the gold standard. We dive deep with the producers, traders, consultants, and renegades driving this seismic shift. Step inside the raw mechanics of how verification and blockchain-fueled trading are dismantling the old systems and creating a future where alternative energy doesn't just compete, it takes over. This is the movement of reshaping energy as we know it, bold, unstoppable, and just getting started. Here is your host, Mark Smith.
Hey everybody, this is Mark Smith, the host of Empirical Energy podcast, where we really look at the intersection between energy, AI, and blockchain. I'm here with my co-founder, David Conley. Welcome, David.
Hey, what's up, man?
This kind of reminds me a little bit when we started, March of 2020. We actually started with a podcast, and it was the day energy hit minus 35 or something like that. And we actually said, this is either going to be starting this business, either going to be the dumbest idea we ever did, or it's going to be genius. Yep. It actually turned out to be okay with a bunch of,
I don't know if I would say genius, but yeah. Sure.
It turned out to be good. But anyway, and part of that, going back to that origin thing, why did energy just drop like that? And all of what are now our clients were dealing with something because nat gas in particular, it's hard to store. It's all a commodity. They can't differentiate anything. And it just all gets shoved in the pipeline, all gets treated the same. And I think one of the things we've found since we've started is that our customers really do produce something different. Some of our customers produce really clean. Like we're talking orders of magnitude cleaner. Yeah. And we only discovered that because we're able to do empirical measurement and stuff like that. So anyway, let's go back to how we got started a little bit and then bring people up to speed here.
Yeah, I remember sitting in the hot tub, man. Sitting in the old hot tub, drinking a brewski and trying to think, what am I going to do? I was actually laid off at the time. And I was just, what am I going to do? I'm tired of this oil field layoff cycle that happens every 3 or 4 years. And so anyway, I went to work for Luke, our other co-founder, who's not here. And you had just talked to me like a couple of weeks before about IoT and started teaching me about software. And
I had a podcast, IoT.
No, that was funny. But anywho, we were, I went to work for Luke and started the weekend working at a brand new job, new boss, new everything. I start pitching him on, hey man, I think we can do some software. I think we can figure it out. We'll figure it out somehow. I don't know. And he actually listened. He was like, oh, okay, it's interesting. Yeah. And then he's like, get this work done for me, please. I was like, okay. But anywho, as things progressed there at Mission Fab or Method Flow, and it started getting really serious in Colorado. The regulatory environment started getting really serious. And these guys that would come into the shop, they would talk about the setbacks and all the things that were happening that could potentially put them not out of business, but make it very hard to drill a well in Colorado, even harder than it is already. And so it was a problem. It was a big problem. And at the time, I didn't really know how to solve it, but I knew that we could apply software and AI based on our conversations we were having on the side, Mark, about, hey man, there's this whole other world out there of IoT and computer vision. And yeah, I remember you telling me about a buddy you had that was either at Amazon or something when computer vision really first came out, and they were studying how you walk in smart cities and tracking like how you walk. If they couldn't get your face, they could track the behavior of your walk and tie you to your data set and AWS and how you shop and all this kind of, it's like wild, deep data aggregation stuff. And that just blew my mind. And I knew how antiquated some of the oil and gas technology was, but I knew there was a reason for it. And one of the main reasons was it's really hard to put everything in classified areas, right? You have a classification problem in oil and gas that holds back a lot of technology. because it becomes cost prohibitive and doesn't make sense for the wellhead. So that's where cameras started to make a lot of sense, because you could get cameras positioned outside of classification areas. You could still do a lot of cool tech with them. And anyway, as we progressed, we talked to our buddies over at Extraction at the time and said, hey, how do you guys find leaks now? If this is a serious problem, you guys are looking at setbacks, and it was Proposition 112 was the name of the big thing. And you need to prove that you're not leaking and things like that. Like, how would you do that now? And they started telling us about LDAR. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that term in my life. And so they gave me Fishburne's phone number. He was the global key accounts manager at FLIR at the time. So I called him. I was like, hey, man, I want to build a software that automates LDAR. And he's what? But he was actually really bullish on it because he had seen that vision before. And anyways, so he loaned us a camera. We got started. At the time, it just so happened that we had friends, family friends that were in computer vision and could help us. And it just started to come together. And this is a long origin story, but that's really how it happened. Is a bunch of really, I don't know if you want to talk about cosmic alignment or divine appointment or however you want to say that, but a lot of things clicked and came into place right at the right time. And we were able to produce a proof of concept computer vision model that could detect fugitive emissions in about 90 days. From whenever we said, hey, this is a problem to solve, to our first proof of concept, it was like a 90-day to maybe 120-day process where we had definitive proof that this concept could be accomplished. And so that was a huge win. And it took a lot of different people to come together to make that happen. And that was it, right? We started showing that to producers, and they saw the vision. And then all of a sudden, there was a camera on a facility. And then we began to really understand the implication of putting a vision system on an oil and gas facility and all the other things that we could see, tank levels and smoke and fire and all these other things that were really important as inspections that needed to be done, or really like emergency situations could be. And our first customer saw that same thing and said, wow, we can do a lot with cameras, actually. And it tore down that classification problem, the running wire all over our facility and putting sensors everywhere. And that was what kind of held a lot of people back. And I was like, oh no, it's one wire. And the sensors just happens to see everything. You put it out there, you run wire, you run power, it's outside of classification, you start scanning your facility. What all can you see? Yeah, and that was the jump off point. That's what created the Autonomous 365 bundle, is a brainstorming session from our customer that sent us a list of 10 models that said, here you go. If you can do these 10 things, I can augment my night operators and stop putting human beings on the road in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. when the roads are icy in the middle of the winter. That was the entire value proposition of them, was putting human beings outside of harm's way, which is very interesting. That ended up launching the Clean Connect business. And yeah, so that's the origin story. From there, it just continues to this point now where we're at Empirical Energy, which is a broader category. It solves a bigger macro problem using the tools from this inspection problem. Right?
Well, I'm going to comment
so
about
that's kind of evolved.
I just remember coming in and just saying, okay, how does stuff work in the upstream oil and gas? And yeah, people are getting in trucks and going out all the time. And it reminded me of where I came from, right? In the Channel Pro world, I was a publisher when it was NT Mag, and the typical thing that would happen, even in circa 2000, something would break, you get in a car, you drive out, you replace some piece of hardware. And then around 2010, things, even earlier, 2005, things started to shift in the general IT space with a new category product called remote monitoring and management. And then it got to the point where I came from Channel Pros and the IT channel, and you only went out to a site to fix something if you absolutely had to. Everything else could be done remotely. I come in to hear about upstream oil and gas, go, wait a second, this reminds me of the IT world 20
Sure.
years ago. You know what? I think remote monitoring management is inevitable. And I remember in the beginning, all the oil and gas people, I think maybe even you said, like, no
100%.
way. Yeah, no way remote monitoring management will happen. I go, you know what? It needs to happen. And I think we're going to help create that,
Sure.
right? If we can do that with our camera system, and instead of somebody needing, like, he can't see anything, so he's got to get in a truck and drive out and see what's going on. But instead, if he can actually see whatever he would see, and if you had a modern control systems, maybe they can even fix stuff remotely.
Sure.
And I think we're helping that vision happen.
Absolutely. Autonomous operations. That's the holy grail of what we're doing. There's still a long way to go from an actual control standpoint, right? Saying, hey, this happened, do this, if this, then that. Statements that actually turn valves, and that's dangerous stuff, right? And there's always that element of safety that the initial pushback you got was around that. So, hey, things
Sure.
blow up versus where a server goes down. But no, 100%. It can happen. It will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Some of the things that at the beginning, we're now starting to run cameras on there, and we're getting now thousands of hours under our belt. So we can say, okay, what are we seeing? What are the things that are creating these large, quote unquote, leak events or emitter events? You say, I could sum them up in three things: cold venting,
Sure.
tanks overpressuring, and loadout things where a pumper truck shows up, does something, creates an event, and then leaves. Right. So
Yep.
that was a lot. Now, since then, we've had more and more millions of videos, or our AI system is monitoring. So now we could even tweak that type thing. But those three in particular, you don't need to go out to site to fix them. I mean, tanks
No.
over pressure, unless a pressure relief valve is stuck open or something. But certain mechanical events happen and then they fix, and you can see that it happened. You can see that it resolved. Or cold venting, you relight a pilot light, or the pumper truck goes away.
Sure.
Those are things that
There's one
maybe in the
other
past they would have had to gone and drive out to go
100%.
see. Now they don't.
Yeah, 100%. And there's one other funny thing to tie into those three things, and that's the intermittency, right? Where you could have a monitor go off, you drive out there, you pull your on-call Eldar guy, hey man, we got some monitors going off, you need to go figure out what's going on. He shows up, and then the issue is just not even there anymore. And he's playing hide and seek with leaks, and it's just a nightmare. Solving the intermittency problems also proved out to be very important, and having a distinctive visual evidence of what's happening versus an alarm went off, right? I got a fence line, whether it be a fence line monitor, an LEL monitor, something like that, where all of a sudden you got to figure out what happened, but you can't because it doesn't exist anymore. The problem doesn't exist anymore. The pilot light relit, the tank came back under pressure. The loadout happened again, and the second guy closed the thief hatch, or however they do it. Solving the intermittency problem was also a big deal. It just popped into my head. I just put the dots together, like all three of those big things that we see all the time. We only see them because there's autonomous cameras all the time looking. If an operator used any other type of system, they probably know that it happened. They can put the dots together, but they have no proof. It's just more than likely a loadout happened and the dude left the thing open. That's really all they could say. And so that's not necessarily a great story to tell the community whenever you're talking about environmental stewardship and being net zero and being a clean operator. And if you can't say what happened, this is how we fixed it, ultimately not really holding up your end of the bargain as an operator in that community. Just something to think about.
But a few things happen as a result. Number one, you see a detection a lot quicker than you would have, so you can go fix it or make sure that it's resolved quicker. Okay, that
Sure.
versus waiting till the next time you happen to get out there or the next LDAR inspection. I think second of all, now that we had a reliable way of detecting, then people asked us, okay, can you measure that stuff? Can you empirically measure it? Because emission factors is the one thing that is the bane of everybody's existence. They turn into subpart W. It's just a bunch of guesstimates. Nobody believes it. Even the EPA doesn't believe it. So you do this whole tedious, painful exercise to turn in a report that nobody believes. And how do the regulators determine that everything's really bad? Okay, you fly planes over. And what do you see? Those intermittent things.
Yep.
And so you see them for about 5 seconds. Then you go back and you say, how long was that happening? You can't bookend the leak like we can. So you
Yep.
guess. So you multiply a factor by it and you say, oh my gosh, look how bad things are. Like we'll see something and it overpressures or it cold vents and we see that it's resolved. But they go, I saw that thing. How long was it lasting? Let's make up a number, a factor to multiply it by. Sure enough, this whole thing's horrible. It's
Yeah.
the worst ever. It's 10 times worse than we could possibly imagine because
Yeah.
they just see an intermittent leak, they multiply it by a factor, and they go, it's horrible out there.
Yeah. And then they got to go publish that to the public.
And then we got to create 3,000 pages of new regulations to solve that problem, which is totally based on a guesstimate.
On nonsense. 100%. It's exactly what happens.
So we're like, all right, our customers really drug us into the empirical measurement business. They said, hey, now we see you could detect. And so how do we get into
That's super important. And I don't know if I would agree with drug. I think that
okay, they wanted us to get into, and like we do, we say, hey, is this a problem for one operator or a problem for all operators? And if it's a problem for all operators, we're like, okay, let's solve it.
Let's do it. Yep.
And
absolutely.
let's see if somebody's willing to actually pay us to go come up with a solution for everybody, which has been our MO. Almost in every case, people said, yeah, this is a bad problem. It's painful. Here's an early adopter sense. We go.
Yeah, I think the key is the operators knew it was nonsense, still today, that it's nonsense, and didn't want to be penalized anymore or vilified anymore. It was, hey, we come to this community, we are paying for the education of this community, we're paying schools and all the things, all the benefits of being able to have an oil and gas community, right? It's a big deal. It's a very stimulus for everybody, not just people that work directly. Indirectly, it's a great thing for a community. When you come in and you do it really well and you are clean and very safe and you care about the community, and that shows and that comes through in the way you permit your facilities and all those things. But then you got to go fill out this report and it says something completely different. At the end of the day, we need to prove to the community and to the regulatory community and to the stakeholders and to our investors and everybody who believed in us, we need to prove that we are doing this the right way. And that's very hard to do. It's a very hard problem. Whenever we started with some of our operators that are fully deployed all of our tech on their facilities, we would start displacing 2, 3, 4, 5 different other technologies that were cobbled together to try to solve that problem. And as you try to integrate more things and you try to get higher fidelity data and better data sets, it becomes really convoluted and complex because you don't actually know, well, my flyover says this, my fence line monitors say this, my satellites, I'm getting pinged on this, and oh, by the way, my mass balance says this, my meters say this. You got to somehow reconcile all of that. It's a very hard problem to solve. So that's what we're up against. It was very important for us to be a closed loop system that actually comes in and does the monitor, measure, report, verify, and we got to get some sort of asset to be able to trade so that we can actually benefit. So there's actually a potential monetary benefit. The monetary benefit for producers solves even a bigger problem for the buyers on their LCA. So we started down this path where the big problem was the data itself, right? The data itself is just an absolute mess, inundated with emissions factors and all those other things, right? That's the big, hairy elephant in the room. And operators are very sensitive, right? Because for them, their data is great, right? They have the seek systems, they have their ignition, and they have all of the really cool tech, works really well. And but at the end of the day, it all tells a different story. And so it's fine. All this works really good, but the data has to reconcile. It has to make sense. And so that's where we started. We had the camera system. We had the benefit of knowing and seeing in real time what was happening on a facility from a fugitive standpoint. We knew if somebody was leaking or wasn't, and we knew for how long. We could book in that. It became a very important data set. It became a foundational data set to say, okay, now if I take all of the rest of this data and put it together and balance it and go from the wellhead to the LAC unit and see how all that ties together, and then can I turn around and look at my camera data and say, whenever this data tells me that something's off, what are my cameras? And being able to reconcile those two things together became a beautiful thing, right? And that harmonious data set, now all of a sudden you have a visually verified system that solves an even bigger problem for the buyer. So now the producers become really key on the future of, let's say, Apple's lifecycle analysis, right? Because or these big AI data centers or these big LNG offtakes, all of this stuff really becomes really important because now we're dealing with scope 2 and scope 3 emissions claim, which is nearly impossible to get any real meat on the bone there. So long story short, yeah, the villain, I think for me, is the data. And I think the ramifications of it are the risk whenever you start putting yourself out there and saying, look how clean we are. And then people just do hit job after hit job. You know, I don't know if you saw the Coke. Coke had a big hit job on them where they were moving the fence line monitors up and down. And then you have all these things where it's just, okay, that didn't work. I need to be able to definitively say that this is true. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to go, it doesn't have to be squishy. We can be very transparent. We are able to rate the data, give it an integrity, give it a fidelity score. We're able to say in this GHG statement, in this transferable asset, this is the meters that were used. This is their proving schedule. This is their tolerance. All of those things are included. All of those things are put together in one harmonious, everybody's singing from the same sheet of music. And it becomes really hard to displace. It becomes really hard to say it's not true, right? Because, okay, you tell me what's the truth then. And understanding that dynamic is really important for producers, I think. So anywho, there's my rant.
I think and that's the thing. We saw this. We had clients who said, hey, I need to empirically measure my feedstock. And we even had to come up with a new name because there was certified gas, responsibly sourced gas, or differentiated gas. And it was all subjective. You check a bunch of lists and they get them an A grade. But the traders we met with a trader who really deflated it and said, I don't care. A grade. So we found Gunvor who said, hey, can you guys do ISCC, this internet? And we're like, what is that? So we're looking it up and there's 300 members and there's some of the biggest Fortune 100 names. And it has a protocol about ISO 14067 with mass balance. We're like, okay, this is not going to be easy, but it's rigorous and we can actually do this. And it's based on chemical engineering that even our chemical engineer, Janet, can get her head wrapped around. Sure. So we did it. We got it certified. And now we have a trader who's saying, I could use this. Finally, I can do this. And I think it really gets to the goal that they all wanted, which is we're seeing producers who may do 3% method intensity or 0.3 or 0.03 or 0.003. And today they get zero premium for that cleanness. And we're going to solve that.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
And I think it's important to frame up what is the problem the data set even solves, right? Because we're talking about emissions factors in upstream and even midstream, just emission factors in general. They're transferable, right? Whenever I don't know, let's take a Amazon data center, right? Pulls natural gas, burns natural gas to generate enough power to power the servers, right? they're having to say, okay, Mr. Duke Energy or Mr. whoever you want to call, what is the carbon intensity of this natural gas? And dude just, I don't know. And they go to their producer and say, what's your carbon intensity? They say, I don't know, I didn't measure that. And here's my sub RW report. Doesn't say anything about carbon intensity, who knows? And so now they have to calculate it. Or they use a default factor, right? And a default factor is either going to come from the producer, which is going to be a default factor of the subpart W report, or it's an IPCC, some sort of governing body that says, okay, the default factor of natural gas burning, combusting is X. I think the default factor for natural gas combusting is like 79 grams of CO2e per megajoule, something like that. I've seen it higher, but we'll say 79 to be conservative. Okay, so we go in, and by the way, the majority of that is the combustion at power gen plants and the production. So they're saying, okay, production is 12, let's call it 12 to 15 grams of CO2e per megajoule on a molecule or an MMBTU of energy that's produced from natural gas. What happens is we go in and we do this, kind of what we talked about earlier around, okay, we have this mass balance, we visually verify it, we check your meters, we make sure they're approved, we check the composition of what's coming out of the ground, we make sure we account for your tolerances, your meter tolerances. If you don't have meters, we suggest that you put them in, or we have to factor them. Okay, so it's a scale, it's a spectrum, right, of data fidelity that we measure, and we publicize that. And at the end of that data set, we look and see, okay, what is an empirical measurement on production? And I have not seen it over one. We have quite a bit of facilities on the system, right? Over 200 of them that we're looking at right now. I've never seen a production facility produce an MMBTU of energy over 1 gram of CO2e per megajoule, and they're reporting 12. So 12 times higher is what they're actually being forced to report to your LCA. So whenever I go back to the Amazon data center and I say, oh, by the way, take that from a 79 to a, I don't know, 50. Now all of a sudden they've saved 20, 30, 40% of carbon. They've taken a 40% carbon reduction immediately, right then. And so that's a massive shift in the way that these guys are thinking about buying carbon credits, buying offsets. All of a sudden, we're flipping that to go from, you need to buy insets. The energy that you consume yourself needs to be better. And we can show you how you can use a scalable energy solution. I think that's one of the key words in this solution is scalable, because wind, solar, great, clean, they're not scalable. Alternative energy is not scalable. Hydrogen is not scalable. CCS is not scalable. It's not reliable. So whenever we talk about, okay, why does natural gas dominate already and will continue to dominate in the next 20, 30, 40 years? That's because it's scalable, it's easy, it's transferable. You can use it, it works. So we take that thing that already works and we enhance it and we make it cleaner. And that's, at the end of the day, you're killing two birds with one stone. You're getting a really good, clean energy to use, a really scalable energy to use, a cost-effective solution for a data center, especially whenever you start blending it. We haven't talked about the blending yet, but whenever you start taking an ENG molecule and say, let's blend it with an RNG molecule, and we'll go poultry-based RNG molecule, which is like a negative 200 CI, and you go 4-to-1, you say, okay, I got 4 50s and a negative 200. Now I have a net zero gas. And now Amazon, the data center in North Carolina, is consuming net zero gas.
And so that's the thing. And we can
inset.
And what's good about empirical energy and empirical gas, empirical RNG, is that we're finally measuring it. I know a lot of the RNG was having to rely on subsidies and emission
Hmm.
factors, same kind of things. I need these subsidies, I need these credits, I need this thing. What if those went away? Just,
Which didn't they go away?
I think with the Inflation Reduction Act being rewound piece by piece,
Yeah.
yeah, some of these subsidies could go away. Then what? You
Yeah.
invest in a bunch of this stuff. The blueprint is this. You get your natural gas empirically measured and third party certified, ISCC. You get your RNG empirically measured, mass
Hmm.
balance and certified. Now you can do all kinds of things. Those ingredients can now be used in different recipes. I can use
100%.
them for net zero gas, like we mentioned, biomethanol, bio
Sure.
LNG, this, that, and the next.
SAF.
Yeah. And so
Sustainable aviation fuel.
so for the first time ever, really, a lot of our customers, natural gas, whose only customer really was the closest midstream company. I sell you
Hmm.
gas, you give me whatever spot price or forward contract. That's it. But to
Hmm.
think that thing could be used for all kinds of other alternative fuels, which can be scaled, is a game changer. It's a brand new
Yeah,
paradigm.
absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important as we reveal the outcomes here is we should talk about the questions we get on a daily basis about this. My physical gas is going to this pipeline. How does that work? Speak a little bit to how this trading mechanism works and why is it allowed? Why does it make sense? I think that's something we should talk about
Yeah.
because I know people listening to this right now are thinking, all my gas goes into a pipeline. So how is it different? Right. And that's one of the big problems that we're solving because you're right. All of the gas goes in the pipeline and then it commingles. And then you have gas from 4 different producers going in a pipeline and it's all the same, right? It's commoditized immediately. So how does that work?
So I think we are in it's a baseball game with multiple innings. Okay. So inning one, emission factors, we do this stuff and people go through these various subsidies. And essentially what they try to do is buy their way out of the problem. I got a
Mhm.
bunch of energy. I'm going to buy some trees in Africa, call them carbon credits. I'll marry those carbon credits together and I'll call it net zero gas. Those days are gone because a lot of places that's called greenwashing. You can't do that anymore. All right. So then inning two, we figure out the empirical stuff, the third party certification, and we allow for something called book and claim. Okay, so now we're doing this very detailed emission accounting where we can account for this, the life cycle analysis, all the things we talked about, 14067 mass balance. So now we can actually account for those molecules along it and then book those and claim those in different parts of the stream.
Yep.
Inning three, we're going to get into a deal where, okay, can this birth certificate or EAC, energy attribute certificate, travel along with that energy physical? Okay. What we're hearing about with these AI data centers is talking about on-site power, literally where they'll co-locate next to physical nat gas. And so instead of the pipeline being all mixed together, they'll literally have their own gas, maybe even turn it into hydrogen on the fly, generate their own deals. So now they control the entire little mini supply chain to produce that thing. Now you can have both the energy, the EAC, that attribute, alongside the physical gas, and now they're married together. It literally travels together. It can be tracked all the way through the supply chain. And then we believe enough premiums or enough certain regulation like EU CBAM or Asia Pacific requirements to where entire supply chains, which can be controlled by some traders who will
Mhm.
say, I'm buying this upstream, I buy everything going through this pipeline, I'm buying the liquefaction plant, I'm buying the transport ship. So they control that supply chain. Then eventually the physical and the virtual will travel along together. And then ultimately, as more and more of this stuff gets empirically measured, it all goes together. And there will be really two classes of product,
Mhm.
documented and undocumented,
Sure.
essentially.
No, that's true.
Yeah. So it'll be a multiple inning deal, but we're in that inning right now to where book and claim is allowed. And we can get all the measurement figured out. People can start getting premiums for that and get actually recognized for all that right now and get into some brand new alternative energy things, which are can be quite lucrative.
Yeah, absolutely. What about, I could speak a little bit to this as well, but why is it important to be vertically integrated? We talked a little bit about that already, about the mishmash of data coming in and all of that kind of stuff. Whenever we started I don't know if displacing is the right word, but whenever we started at the very beginning of this problem, all the way to the very end, there's a lot of other technologies in the mix there that we've seen. And one of the things I guess I just want to say is every single one of those technologies has a cost associated to it, right? And whenever you start stacking those up and stacking to, you have 5 or 6, 7 different things in your tech stack, in your differentiated gas tech stack, all of a sudden it becomes null and void, right? Where it's this is not really worth it anymore. The juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore.
We saw that. We have
Yeah, we
clients
saw it.
that were doing that, spending 3 years and hitting a wall, quite frankly, because they have multiple monitoring solutions, multiple measurement solutions, multiple reporting, multiple verification. And every time you add another system, the level of complexity, I mean, you manage the development team, the level of complexity of integrating all those becomes overwhelming. In fact, there's probably some equation that I just need to figure out what that is. But
Yeah.
each time you add another system, how more the level of complexity goes up. So having a vertically integrated where our empirical energy platform takes care of all those things and even makes it easier for the verifier, the certifier to certify, rinse, repeat, do it over and over because we put data in an NFT and all this kind of good stuff that we do. Yeah, it just reduces the complexity of integration, really. And
that's right. So we're talking about outcomes, right? Outcomes of the empirical energy. And I think if somebody's listening to this, their burning question is, what does the premium look like? And when we talk about the impact of displacing RNG or these other alternative fuels that are extremely expensive, we've seen premiums.
Yeah. So in a previous episode, I highly recommend everybody go back and watch this episode with myself and Shane Foster from Gunvor. And we talk about that very thing because the first time we ever met him, we recount a conversation we had, say, I got some deals that I've been circling around for a long time, 54 BCF in one case, where I would have to hit the CI score that the customer wants. I have to buy all the RNG in the entire world
that exists.
Yeah. And my arbitrage, that's how traders make money, finding the arbitrage. There was none. I'm buying something at 30, I'm selling it for 30. I'd love to service this customer, but I can't do it. Now with empirical gas, empirically measure the RNG, empirically measure the natural gas, now come out with this. This is a game changer because I have to buy way less RNG and I can buy this instead. So it's a game changer. So anyway, I know we got to wrap up, David. So I thought I would just do the last thing. If anybody's interested in this, figuring out how it all works, we would set up a meeting. And quite frankly, we highly recommend if you're a producer, bringing your marketer along. We could set you up with Gunvor, talk to the side, but we'd be happy to. The market is still early. Premiums are definitely there. So you really are going to benefit big time by getting in early on this.
Yeah,
I think
I can speak a little bit to the process there. What we do is we meet, we'll run a few weeks of data at a few of your facilities, just a CSV export or something that we can quickly check on. And if your natural gas oil is being produced at a relatively clean CI score, then from there we say, okay, let's do this thing together. And we deploy Proof Zero and Autonomous 365 throughout your assets and start producing empirical natural gas, E&G versus natural gas.
So if you've been wondering, like, how clean is my energy? We're going to put a challenge out there for you. If you qualify and your energy is clean and you're a good candidate, we could even put Proof Zero in for free. So 100%. That is the absolute best because 100%. We believe, and which means we got to make money off of that premium. So we believe so much, we're willing to literally invest in your company, get on the same side of the table with you and build this whole empirical energy thing out together. Absolutely. David, thanks for sharing the story. This is a good episode.
This is fun.
Nice new era as we begin the empirical energy journey together.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Have a good one.
All right.
The Empirical Energy podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.